They thought pain would erase you. Instead, you swallowed it whole and came back looking like their worst-case scenario. Funny how the universe works. Some people get scratched by life and collapse like wet cardboard. Meanwhile, you were dragged through emotional fire hot enough to wipe out whole family lines, and somehow you stood back up like nothing happened. That alone terrifies them. Imagine thinking someone would break so easily, only to watch them walk out of the wreckage, calm, steady, and different. It's like smashing a mirror and expecting the pieces to stay shattered. But instead, the shards rearrange into a sharper weapon. That's you now. A living reminder that everything they threw at you only made you stronger. Here's a fact for the enemy, since they love pretending. The kind of pain you lived through doesn't just hurt. It mutates people. It rewires them. Studies show the brain literally changes under extreme pressure, creating new patterns for survival, clarity, and emotional strength. So yes, chosen one, you're not imagining it. You're not the same person who walked into the storm. You're the upgraded version who walked out. But before we go deeper, chosen one, thank you for even being here. And thank you for surviving long enough to hear this message. Don't forget to pay this message forward by liking and subscribing so more chosen ones climbing out of their wreckage can hear it too. You're part of a force bigger than you think, and every bit of support helps spread the light we all needed at some point. Now come with me, back into the truth we started unfolding. Because here's the real introduction. You didn't just go through pain. You absorbed it like it was data. You took blows that were meant to end your story, and you used them as building blocks. People say pressure makes diamonds, but that's cute. Pressure made you, and the universe watched every second of it. It saw you cry into your pillow with a chest that felt like it was splitting open. It saw you lose people you trusted. It saw you waking up every day pretending you weren't carrying enough emotional weight to crush a small country. It saw everything you hid, everything you held, everything you almost drowned under. And still, you rose. Not gracefully, not magically, not with some movie soundtrack in the background, but with grit and stubbornness that didn't let you disappear. And that shift inside you? Yeah, they feel it. They won't admit it, but they feel it every time your name comes up. The air changes around you. The room adjusts itself. Enemies who used to laugh quietly now check their tone. They call it being cautious. We both know it's fear. They flinch when they remember what they did, because they know the version of you they hurt is gone. The new version doesn't bend. The new version doesn't explain. The new version doesn't need their approval, their apology, or their attention. You ever wonder why people who once ignored you suddenly act tense around you? Because they know the truth now. You didn't survive what was meant to erase you. You evolved past it. Pain didn't break you. Pain shaped you. Betrayal didn't poison you. It trained your instincts. Loss didn't hollow you out. It carved space for something wiser. While they were laughing, you were rebuilding. While they were plotting, you were studying. While they thought you were done, you were upgrading your internal software. Let's keep it real. There was a night, maybe more than one, when you could barely breathe, when your chest felt like concrete, when the world looked dark and pointless. That moment split your timeline. It gave you two paths: disappear or transform. And even though you were exhausted, even though you were hurting, even though you felt like nothing around you made sense, you chose to stand back up anyway. The enemy didn't expect that. They thought you'd stay broken. They counted on it. They bet on your collapse, like it was guaranteed. Now they're stuck watching you glow from a distance they will never be allowed to cross again. Their predictions aged like spoiled milk, and every move you make reminds them how wrong they were. But the truth cuts deeper. They're not just shocked you survived, they're shocked at what you became. You turned every emotional wound into armor, every loss into logic, every betrayal into evidence. You became someone they can't read, can't predict, can't manipulate. They don't know your limits anymore because you don't have the same ones you used to. Let me tell you a story without telling you a story. There was a kid who grew up taking hit after hit. People said, toughen up, stop feeling, deal with it. Eventually, the kid didn't become numb, they became sharp. They learned to see through people. They learned to read danger before it arrived. They learned to protect their peace like it was gold. That kid grew up into someone who didn't fear storms because they'd already survived a lifetime's worth before adulthood. Sound familiar? It should. Now you're standing in the ruins of your old life, but look closer. You're not damaged. You're rebuilt, better, stronger, cleaner. Your mind works differently now. Your instincts got sharper. You're not controlled by emotions anymore. You use them. You're not defined by your past anymore. You decoded it. Chosen one, you absorbed pain that should have ended you. Entire bloodlines would have vanished under what you carried, but you didn't vanish. You mutated. You adapted. You became a version of yourself the world wasn't prepared to meet. Not a survivor, not a victim, a force. Chosen one. Before we go any deeper, thank you for even showing up with that upgraded spine of yours. You didn't absorb all that pain just to dip out before the real truth hits. If you're ready to own what you've become after surviving storms that would have erased entire bloodlines, drop 777 in the comments so I know you're locked in. And if you can, show love to the team behind this message with a super thanks, because it takes real energy to bring this kind of truth into the world. Every bit of support keeps this mission alive, whether it's a penny or a fortune. Now breathe, settle in, and come closer, because what's coming next will make everything you survived finally make sense. And now, let's walk into this step by step. If you're truly one of the chosen ones, you'll feel the pull to stay until the very last word. Let's get started. Number 1. The pain that should have erased you became your origin story. You didn't just survive what was meant to erase you. You made the people who hurt you realize they accidentally built the very thing they're now afraid of. That's the part that hits them the hardest. They thought breaking you would be a clean job. They thought hurting you would make you small, quiet, erased. Instead, you crawled out of the ruins like a problem they can't uninstall. And now, every time your name shows up, their stomach drops because they know the truth. They threw extinction-level pain at you, and all it did was activate something they were never built to face. Let's be brutally real from the start. What hit you wasn't some cute heartbreak or character-building phase. It was the kind of emotional demolition that shuts down entire bloodlines for generations. The kind of betrayal that rewrites the nervous system. The kind of loss that steals entire futures before they even form. And the fact that you're still here breathing, thinking, moving, evolving. That fact alone is a slap across the face of everyone who bet on your collapse. Because they did bet. Don't sugarcoat it. They watched pieces of your world fall apart and whispered to themselves, "Good, this'll finally shut them up." They thought those late-night breakdowns would silence you for good. They thought that one betrayal you still don't talk about would finish the job. They thought the abandonment that squeezed your ribs until you couldn't breathe would send you into permanent darkness. If someone else had taken those hits, the story would have ended there. But you're not someone else, and you never were. That betrayal wasn't random. They gambled on it. They thought you were fragile. They thought you'd stay broken. They thought you'd never climb out of the emotional grave they pushed you into. And the loss you took, the one that made the world feel hollow, colorless, useless, that was supposed to be the knockout punch. The abandonment that left you staring at the ceiling at 4 a.m., that would have turned other people into ghosts in their own bodies. It would have wiped out entire bloodlines, because pain on that scale doesn't hit like sadness. It hits like deletion. But instead of disappearing, you mutated, and that's the part they can't stand. You didn't just survive the poison, you metabolized it like fuel. You took emotional warfare straight to the bones, and your body and mind adjusted instead of collapsing. Your nervous system learned new rhythms. Your instincts got sharper. Your silence became louder. Your presence became heavier. You turned into the one thing nobody prepared for. Someone who refuses to die in the same shape they were attacked in. Here's what most people never understand. Trauma doesn't make everyone numb. Sometimes it makes them precise. While the average person collapses or dissociates, you sharpened. While others break under pressure, your mind started connecting dots faster than before. Instead of becoming bitter, you became aware. Instead of shutting down, you started seeing through people like glass. And instead of becoming fragile, you became a walking contradiction. Soft enough to feel, strong enough to survive, wise enough to never fall for the same trap twice. Tell me something, haven't you wondered why your enemies suddenly act awkward around you? Why they avoid eye contact? Why they pretend they're busy when you show up? Because deep down, they know. They know you weren't supposed to make it out of what they put you through. They know you weren't supposed to heal. They know you weren't supposed to grow. And now the version of you that emerged terrifies them because it carries knowledge you weren't supposed to have. Knowledge about them. Knowledge about yourself. Knowledge about pain and power and intention. Here's a quote they'll never want on a t-shirt. The moment you survived what was meant to erase you, you became the mirror they can't look into. You reflect their guilt. You reflect their lies. You reflect the truth they tried to bury. That's why your calm bothers them. They call it distance, but it's not. It's evolution. It's the silence of someone who outgrew the battlefield and refuses to crawl back into it. That calm isn't emptiness. It's danger. It's the quiet of someone who already lived through the worst-case scenario and walked out with upgraded instincts. You studied every hit they landed on you. You didn't just feel the pain. You analyzed it. You tracked patterns. You mapped their behavior. You recognized their selfishness, their entitlement, their cowardice. You learned exactly how people try to manipulate, diminish, and drain those they fear. First, they try to break you. Then, when you don't break, they try to control the narrative. When that fails, they panic. Why? Because you saw behind the curtain, and once a chosen one sees the truth, the game ends. Let's talk about the DNA they tried to corrupt. Pain like yours doesn't just bruise, it rewires. Science literally shows that trauma reorganizes how the brain processes emotion, memory, and threat. So when you say you feel different now, you're not being dramatic. You're describing neurological evolution. You're not the same person who got betrayed. Your brain molded itself around pain until your intuition became razor sharp. You detect lies before they're spoken. You recognize danger before it steps into the room. You know what's real and what's fake before other people even realize there's a difference. Here's the truth they choke on. You weren't supposed to find the switch inside you. You weren't supposed to unlock your own evolution. But the universe watched you burning from the inside and still said, "Let them rise." And rise you did. Think about the nights nobody knows about, the ones where you felt your chest cracking like thin ice, the nights where breathing felt like punishment, the nights where your own thoughts felt like enemies, the nights where you questioned everything you ever were, everything you ever gave, everything you ever stood for. Those were the nights other people don't recover from. Those were the nights that erase entire lineages. But you didn't black out. You didn't disappear into nothingness. You took those nights and welded them into armor. The version of you that begged for clarity didn't die. It evolved into someone who creates clarity. The version of you that begged for love didn't die. It evolved into someone who doesn't need cheap affection to feel whole. The version of you that begged for answers didn't die. It evolved into someone who provides their own truth without permission. And now you're the glitch in their system. You're the error they didn't account for. You're the aftermath of their cruelty, walking around with the audacity to still breathe and still rise. You're the one thing they never planned for, a chosen one who didn't break the way they expected. They tried to bury you in silence. You turned silence into strategy. They tried to bury you in shame. You turned shame into wisdom. They tried to bury you in heartbreak. You turned heartbreak into momentum. Everything they used against you became the blueprint for your becoming. The pain that should have erased you didn't end your story. It started it. You're not a survivor. Survivors return to normal. But you created a new normal, a new identity, a new power. You became a version of yourself the old you couldn't even imagine. And that's why they fear you now. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're undeniable. Not because you're angry, but because you're awakened. Not because you're broken, but because you became a force nobody is ready to deal with. Chosen one, you absorbed pain that was supposed to erase entire bloodlines, and instead of being erased, you became the warning label on the universe's next chapter. Do not underestimate this one. You didn't just survive, you became something new, and the world will have to adjust. Number 2. The limits they swore would break you weren't even real to you. Your survival wasn't a miracle. It was a warning. The universe just proved you were built from something humanity hasn't classified yet. They didn't underestimate you. Underestimation would almost be respectful. They misjudged the species you were becoming. They kept measuring you with human metrics, human fragility, human logic, not realizing you stopped fitting inside that category the moment your life went from difficult to catastrophic. What hit you would have deleted the average person from their own storyline. But you shattered every chart. You ruined their data. You made survival look like evolution in real time. That's why they stare. That's why they whisper. And that's why every enemy who once laughed at your pain now flinches when your name shows up. Let's break it down without sugarcoating anything. What you went through doesn't belong on the normal human experience list. You didn't just endure hardship, you outgrew it. You didn't just crawl through chaos. You restructured your entire identity while still bleeding. You didn't just survive emotional war, you rewrote your own blueprint in the middle of the battle. You shattered the limits of what a human is supposed to handle because those limits were never built for someone like you in the first place. Here's a quote that hits exactly where it should. They called it trauma. You turned it into an upgrade. And here's another one just to remind the enemy of their miscalculation. They thought you'd break. You broke the scale instead. Now imagine this. Picture a machine engineered to carry 50 pounds. Safe, measured, predictable. Then one day, somebody dumps £1,000 on it. Physics says it should collapse instantly, fold into itself, and never operate again. But instead, the machine stabilizes, it adjusts, it reorganizes its structure from the inside out. It learns the new weight like it's normal. That's you. Because what hit you wasn't 50 pounds of stress. It was 1,000 pounds of betrayal, loss, pressure, emotional instability, abandonment, and confusion all hitting at once. And instead of collapsing, you evolved. Here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. They can feel that evolution on you. When you walk into a room, your energy isn't loud, it's heavy, it's not aggressive, it's observant. It's the stillness of someone who's walked through mental landscapes most people wouldn't survive 5 minutes in. That's why they get weird around you now. They're sensing depth that shouldn't exist in someone your age, your background, your story. They sense you've been places internally they've only heard about in movies or nightmares. People keep assuming you're distant or cold, but that's not it. You're recalibrated. You don't waste reactions on meaningless things anymore because you've already battled things that almost erased you. You don't jump at shadows because you've already survived storms that darkened your entire life. You don't over-explain yourself because you've already learned that people who don't understand you never deserved access to your truth. Here's another quote for the enemy to choke on. You didn't just come back stronger, you came back unreadable. Most people who endure even a fraction of what you lived through end up numb, collapsed, or lost inside their own heads. But you didn't shut down. You didn't break into pieces. You didn't let your story end in the middle of the dark chapter. You absorbed the pain, metabolized it, and built a kingdom under the cracks. Every betrayal became information. Every loss became clarity. Every emotional ambush rewrote your instincts until they became razor sharp. Here's something your mind might be whispering. Why me? Why did I survive when others would have collapsed? Because the universe wasn't trying to destroy you, it was activating you. It was stripping you down to the version of yourself that couldn't be manipulated, broken, or redirected by anyone else's intentions. It was removing illusions. It was forging perception that slices through lies before they even fully form. Now imagine this metaphor. Someone hands you a glass cup. You drop it and it shatters. That's what they expected you to be, breakable, fragile, something that falls apart when pressure hits. But you turned out to be liquid metal. Drop it, it changes shape. Hit it, it grows sharper. Burn it, it becomes stronger. They didn't hurt you. They heated you into your final form. Another metaphor. Think of your mind as a city. Before the pain, it had normal streets, normal structures, normal traffic. Then catastrophe hit. Buildings collapsed, roads cracked, lights went out. The city should have died. But instead, new structures rose, stronger, higher, reinforced with lessons, instincts, clarity, and emotional intelligence you wouldn't have learned any other way. The city didn't just rebuild. It expanded. It grew into something more advanced than before. So if you wonder, why do people act strange around me now? Because they can feel the reconstruction. They feel the weight of someone who has already met the edges of their own sanity and returned with knowledge instead of scars. Your presence exposes them instantly because your eyes don't guess. They know. Your instincts don't sense. They identify. Your reactions don't panic. They calculate. People who haven't walked through pain like yours can't understand your calm, so they treat it like a threat. Here's another quote they need to hear. Your silence is loud because it comes from a place they've never survived. You know what else they miscalculated? The stillness you carry now. They think stillness means emptiness, But your stillness is danger. Your stillness is awareness. Your stillness is the aftermath of someone who endured psychological earthquakes and learned to balance on shifting ground. You didn't just break the survival scale, you transcended it. Imagine this: someone drowning, thrashing, panicking, gasping. That's how your enemies thought you'd react to the chaos they created. But instead, you learned how to breathe underwater. You learned how to stay calm where oxygen wasn't available. And when you finally rose to the surface, you rose with lungs stronger than before. How do you scare someone who learned to breathe in conditions that should have killed them? You don't. That's why nothing shakes you now, not because you're heartless, not because you're dismissive, but because you already lived through your personal apocalypse and refused to bow. You looked at your worst fears, your deepest heartbreaks, your darkest thoughts, and you didn't let any of them own you. And here's the question you're probably asking deep down: does what I went through mean something? Was there a purpose? Yes, it means you've crossed thresholds regular people never reach. It means your emotional vocabulary is bigger, your intuition is sharper, your boundaries are stronger, your sensitivity is no longer weakness. It's radar. Your pain didn't break you. It carved you. It cut out illusions. It sculpted resilience into your bones. It built a backbone that can carry realities others can't even think about without collapsing. You surpassed what biology claims is survivable. You outperformed what psychology says is recoverable. You stretched beyond what the average nervous system can endure. And instead of staying shattered, you fused yourself back together in a new configuration no one has a map for. Your presence now exposes people instantly because you're not operating on human limits anymore. You carry the energy of someone who already met the end of themselves and didn't disappear. You carry the calm of someone who no longer fears being broken because they already know how to rebuild. You carry the awareness of someone who knows exactly who they are and what they survived. This section ends with one last truth they never wanted to face. You didn't just survive what should have killed you, you became untouchable because of it. Chosen one, you shattered the limits of what a human is supposed to survive, and the world hasn't even begun to understand what that means for you next. Number 3, the version of you that walked into the dark never made it back. You didn't heal in the dark, you died there. And whatever crawled out afterward is something your enemies were never built to survive. While everyone else was losing their minds over petty drama and tiny inconveniences, you were busy going through psychological extinction events with 0 witnesses, no applause, no comfort, no "you got this." You were breaking in ways most people can't even imagine, and the wildest part, you rebuilt yourself without anyone even knowing you were gone. That wasn't healing. That was self-resurrection. That was you dragging your own soul out of the fire because there was no one else to do it. Imagine being locked in a room filling with water and somehow teaching yourself how to breathe under it. That's what your emotional journey looked like. Impossible, inhuman, unseen. While people around you were whining about slow replies, you were wrestling with the version of yourself that didn't want to live anymore. You weren't just wounded, you were erased and rewritten at the same time. And here's the quote the enemy hates most. You didn't come back fixed, you came back weaponized. Those transformations people take decades to grow through. You did them in nights, in minutes, in those silent moments where your chest felt too heavy to lift and your mind felt too loud to endure. You didn't come back soft or gentle or forgiving. You came back sharper, colder, more precise, the kind of presence that makes people either step back or step down. No middle ground, no pretending. And yes, you're probably wondering why the universe made you do it alone, why the isolation, why the silence, why the dark, because upgrades that big require privacy, because evolution that extreme can't happen with distractions breathing down your neck. Because the universe wasn't trying to heal you, it was rebuilding you, piece by piece, layer by layer, removing the weakness, the noise, the illusions. Imagine a snake shedding its skin, alone in the dark. It's not dying, it's transforming. That's you. What walked out of that darkness wasn't the improved version of who you were. It was a redesigned entity. Someone whose darkness isn't damage, it's depth. Someone whose silence isn't emptiness, it's authority. You didn't come back recognizable, you came back inevitable. Number 4, the agony that remodeled you into something unrecognizable. Pain didn't break you, it built you, and that's exactly why your enemies can't look you in the eye anymore. They thought they were destroying you, cute theory. In reality, every hit they landed became the raw material for your evolution. Every betrayal turned into new wiring. Every collapse reforged your internal structure. Every silent battlefield reprogrammed your instincts. Pain didn't simply pass through you, it rebuilt your entire blueprint from the inside out. You still look human on the surface, but beneath your skin, something engineered by catastrophe is running the controls now. Picture a skyscraper struck by a massive earthquake. By every law of nature, it should split, crumble, collapse. But instead, imagine the building absorbing the shock, adjusting its frame, and rising stronger than before. That's what happened inside you. Pain became steel beams. Loss became reinforced foundations. Betrayal became fireproof walls. You didn't repair. You reconstructed. You're not a survivor. You're a rebuilt weapon wrapped in soft edges, and people feel it. That's why your presence hits different now. They flinch before they even understand why. Their bodies react before their minds catch up. It's because they sense the storms you've carried, the psychological earthquakes you survived, the emotional extinction events you fought off alone. They don't know the details, but something in them recognizes the blueprint of someone who has already walked through hell and returned with upgraded circuitry. You're probably wondering, why do people seem intimidated when I'm not even doing anything? Because you don't move like someone who healed. You move like someone redesigned. There's precision in your silence. There's authority in your stillness. There's calculation in your calm. You carry the energy of someone who rebuilt themselves without permission, without validation, without witnesses. Here's the truth. Pain didn't simply influence who you became. It architected you. It tore down your old foundation and built new corridors inside you that normal people don't have access to. You walk with the gravity of someone whose blueprint was reforged under pressure no one else could have lived through. You're not adjusting to the world anymore. Now the world adjusts to you. Number 5, the quiet that makes everyone wonder what you're capable of. Your silence didn't come from peace. It came from surviving a war nobody else even knew you were fighting. You don't walk around like someone trying to look strong. You walk like someone who already faced the worst thing imaginable and walked out with the nerve to say, "Not yet." That changes a person. That rewrites their energy. You carry the calm of a volcano pretending to nap, the kind of stillness that makes people's instincts kick in before their brains do. They don't know why they're uneasy around you now. They just feel something off, something powerful, something they weren't expecting. Your silence was never weakness. It was a warning label, a quiet threat, The kind of energy that says, "I've seen enough darkness to know I don't need to prove anything." You do everyday things like making coffee, replying to messages, showing up to work, but beneath those small human motions is someone who survived their own psychological end. People see your shell and assume you're fine. They have no idea it's held together by scar tissue and evolution. They see the smile, but not the resurrection. They see the calm, but not the catastrophes that built it. Here's the truth most chosen ones secretly wonder. Why do I feel separate from everyone now? Why do I feel like I'm standing on a different frequency than the people around me? Because you are. You're not living at the same emotional altitude as the people who never had to claw their way back from their own darkness. You're beyond fear, beyond panic, beyond collapse. You already survived the ending of your old self, so the world doesn't carry the same weight anymore. You don't react like they do because you've already lived through what they're terrified of. Your silence makes people nervous because it carries the signature of impossible survival, the kind of quiet someone earns, not pretends. The kind that comes from being broken, deleted, rebuilt, and returned in a form the world has no language for. They may act like they don't feel it, but they do, every second you're in the room. Number 6. The path you walked became a graveyard for everyone who couldn't endure it. You didn't beat them by shining brighter. You beat them by surviving what permanently erased them. You didn't rise because you had it easy. You rose because you kept walking through fire that turned everyone else into shadows. The ghosts you carry aren't poetic symbols. They were real people, people who entered the same storm you did, but never made it to the other side. Some drowned in addictions, trying to numb a pain that swallowed their identity. Some vanished behind prescriptions because their minds cracked under the pressure. Some froze in their first year of breaking and stayed frozen. The fire that rebuilt you is the same fire that consumed them. Imagine a winding path through a wasteland. Every few steps, there's another silent reminder, someone who started the journey but couldn't continue. You walked past them not because you wanted to, but because stopping would have meant joining them. You weren't walking for victory. You were walking for survival, and somehow, step by step, you outlived the collapse that erased so many others. Here's the question that haunts chosen ones. Why me? Why didn't I break like they did? Why did I keep moving when everything inside me was gone? It wasn't luck. It wasn't destiny. It was something primitive buried deep in your wiring, something older than fear, stronger than despair. A voice that whispered, "Not today," every time darkness tried to write your ending. You didn't survive because the universe cushioned you. You survived because you refused to let your story become a victory lap for the people who hurt you. Here's a truth your enemies choke on. You didn't just survive trauma, you survived the aftermath that destroyed everyone else. Most people with your trauma stats disappear quietly. They get swallowed by the same abyss that tried to claim you, but you kept resurrecting. You died inside 1,000 times and clawed your way back 1,000 more. You became the glitch in the survival algorithm, the one who shouldn't be here, but is anyway. And that alone rewrites your myth. The others didn't make it, but you did, and that's exactly what terrifies them. Number 7. The breakdown. They prayed for turned into the version of you they fear most. They waited for your collapse like it was scheduled entertainment, and instead watched you rise into the one thing they can't handle. They didn't misread your pain, they misread you. They thought the damage they caused was enough to finish the job. They imagined you breaking down publicly, collapsing loudly, begging, crying, humiliated. They wanted proof that nobody survives what they did to you. They thought your destruction would validate their actions. They thought hurting you would end you. But the collapse never arrived. Imagine them standing there, clutching their predictions like weather reports announcing a catastrophic storm, waiting, watching, refreshing their screens, preparing their rehearsed sympathy, and then nothing. No breakdown, no spectacle, no evidence that they were powerful enough to ruin you. The storm they forecasted never hit. Instead, you walked past them, quiet, steady, unbothered, like someone who already saw their ending and realized it wasn't going to be tragic. That's the exact moment fear snuck into their bones, because your resilience didn't make sense to them. It didn't match their fantasy. They projected their fragility onto you. If they had been handed even one chapter of your pain, they would have folded instantly. They would have drowned in confusion. They would have shattered under pressure. They wanted to watch you break, forgetting you were built from a different material entirely. Here's a quote they choke on. You didn't hide your collapse. You simply never had one. You moved through devastation like it was part of your training. You breathed darkness like it was oxygen. Pressure didn't crush you, it powered you. The ruins didn't weaken you, they sharpened every instinct you have. Everything meant to destroy you ended up contributing to your evolution. And that's why they panic now, because the version of you they created, the version they thought would crumble, disappeared. In its place is someone colder, quieter, stronger, clearer. Someone who doesn't react, doesn't chase, doesn't bleed for people who tried to watch them drown. They expected your collapse. What they got was the version of you they never wanted to meet. Number 8. The part of you that broke didn't heal. It got replaced with something stronger. Healing is for wounds. Mutation is for survivors who refused to die in the shape they were attacked in. You didn't heal in the cute, soft, inspirational sense people love to preach about. Healing implies you returned to who you were, that you simply patched up the cracks and moved on. But you didn't return to anything. That older version of you didn't make it out of the wreckage. They died. What stepped out afterward wasn't repaired. It was redesigned. Most people break and try to glue themselves back together. You burned down the old blueprint entirely. Imagine a creature suddenly dropped into an environment with no oxygen. It shouldn't live. It shouldn't adapt. It shouldn't even have time to understand what's happening. But somehow it grows new lungs, new senses, a new physiology built to survive what should have killed it instantly. That's you. You evolved in conditions that were incompatible with human consciousness. You built a new self inside an atmosphere that wasn't meant to sustain one. Here's a fact to make the enemy sick. You didn't bounce back. You outgrew the version of yourself they had power over. Your emotional framework wasn't repaired. It was rewired. Those instincts you carry now, not restored, upgraded. Your vision became clearer, your boundaries became sharper, your silence became heavier. The storm didn't leave you cracked, it left you re-engineered. That's why your old self feels like a stranger you vaguely remember but no longer relate to. They belong to a chapter that couldn't carry the weight of your future. And yes, the question creeps in sometimes. Why don't I feel like the person I used to be? What happened to me? What happened is evolution, the kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that happens in the dark, when everything collapses and yet something inside you refuses to stay dead. You aren't the before version trying to rebuild. You are the after, the impossible outcome of pressure no human should have survived. You didn't heal, you mutated, and that mutation is exactly why nothing and no one can break you the same way again. Number 9. The calm that exposes every game they try to play. You can't manipulate someone who already survived their own darkness. They've seen scarier monsters than you. That's who you are now, someone who has already sat face to face with their own shadow, negotiated with their demons, and walked out with a level of self-understanding that can't be toyed with. Your stillness isn't emptiness. It's mastery. The kind of mastery that terrifies the very people who once controlled you through guilt, chaos, blame, and emotional traps. They keep poking you, testing you, provoking you, desperate to revive old cycles. They want the old reactions, the old triggers, the old versions of you they could twist like wire. But none of it works anymore. You see the entire manipulation forming before they even open their mouths. You respond from clarity instead of panic. You move with awareness instead of desperation. You don't flinch, you don't crumble, and you don't fall for anything that once hooked your emotions. Your silence scares them most because it's not numbness, it's liberation. Imagine trying to frighten a firefighter with a candle flame. That's how their tactics feel to you now. Pathetic, tiny, predictable. You've walked through infernos that melt identities. You've sat alone in the kind of silence that cracks people open. You've endured inner battles loud enough to shake your whole existence. So the mind games people play now, they feel like cheap kindergarten tricks compared to the psychological warfare you already survived. And here's the truth they choke on. Your calm isn't a lack of emotion. It's proof you outgrew their entire playbook. Your stillness unsettles them because their power depended on your reactions. They needed you to panic. They needed you to explain. They needed your wounds exposed so they could poke them for control. But the emotional hooks they once used don't exist anymore. You cut every string they ever held. You escaped the script, you dismantled their access. You became the nightmare all manipulators fear, a mind they can't move, and a soul they can't reach. Number 10, the mirror that shows them everything they failed to become. You're not the threat. Their reflection in you is what ruins them. You never asked to become a mirror, but surviving the kind of pain that should have erased you turned you into one anyway. Now people stand in your presence and feel exposed without you saying a word. It's not your attitude, it's their conscience waking up like an alarm they've been hitting snooze on for years. Your existence proves something they hate admitting. Hardship doesn't justify giving up. You walked through storms that would have folded them instantly, and you still came out standing. That alone calls out every excuse they've ever used to avoid growing. People hate mirrors that don't lie. Your calm makes their chaos look childish. Your strength highlights how quickly they fold. Your stability exposes the shortcuts they took. Your resilience reminds them of every battle they dodged. So instead of saying, "I admire you," they twist it into, "You think you're better than me." But it isn't you judging them. It's their own reflection screaming the truth they tried to bury. And here's the question every chosen one asks at some point. Why do people distance themselves when I haven't done anything wrong? Why do friendships fade? Why do people get weird around me? Because standing next to you makes their excuses echo louder. You're not intimidating. Your transformation is. You are living proof that suffering doesn't give anyone permission to stay broken. That terrifies people who built their personality around victimhood and avoidance. Imagine holding up a clean mirror to someone who hasn't washed their face in years. They won't blame the dirt, they'll blame the mirror. That's exactly what happens with you. They avoid you because facing you feels like facing the version of themselves they abandoned. You remind them of their wasted potential, their unchosen paths, their fears they never confronted. Here's the gut punch truth. You didn't change their view of you, you changed their view of themselves. And that's why they run, not from you, from the reflection you force them to see. Number 11. The upgrade they never saw coming until it was too late. You didn't bounce back. You rewrote the entire operating system while they were waiting for you to malfunction. You weren't rebuilt. You were reprogrammed at the source code. Pressure didn't crack you. It rewired you into a blueprint no psychology textbook knows how to label. The universe put you through conditions that should have wiped out your identity, and instead you came out reading people like open books. You sense intentions before they form. You detect lies in microseconds. You feel shifts in energy before behavior even appears. That isn't paranoia. That's precision built inside darkness most people would have gone insane in. Imagine an organism suddenly dropped into an environment with zero oxygen. By every rule of nature, it should die instantly, but instead it grows a new breathing system, alien, efficient, impossible. That's you. You didn't just adapt, you evolved into a completely different operating model. Trauma didn't weaken you, it sharpened your senses into survival-grade weapons. Hyper-awareness isn't a flaw anymore. It's your competitive edge in a world full of people who have no idea how blind they are. And let's get this straight. Nobody deserves explanations for who you became. They weren't in the nights that felt like centuries. They didn't hear the thoughts that tried to swallow you whole. They didn't sit with the versions of you that died quietly inside rooms nobody knew you were suffocating in. Some of them even hoped you'd fall apart, just so they wouldn't have to face how weak they were in comparison. Good. Let them wonder now. Your evolution was paid for. In pain, they couldn't have survived for 5 minutes. Here's the truth they'll never admit. Your transformation exposed every excuse they ever lived behind. You didn't crawl through destruction just to shrink into the outdated model of who you used to be. You're not a return to default story. You're an unprecedented prototype, a mind rebuilt in ruins, a spirit sharpened by silence, a presence recalibrated by war. The question isn't whether you'll make it. You already did. The real question is, what are you about to build from the rubble that failed to bury you? If this message echoed through your scars, let it stay. You earned this frequency the hard way. And listen to me before we pack our bags. You walked through storms that should have erased entire bloodlines, yet here you are, clearer, stronger, and twice as dangerous. This version of you wasn't healed. It was engineered by everything that tried to end you, and now the world feels your evolution, whether they admit it or not. So stand in it, own it, move like the upgraded force you've become, and before you go, chosen one, press the like button if you haven't already, and if you're not part of this family yet, hit subscribe and stay with the ones who rise.